Sometimes it's because of itching ears. They're drawn to churches where they aren't stretched, um, where they aren't challenged to grow, and because of that, they they don't grow and they start to backslide. And I think that you know in this season that this person was in, who said, "Why can't Christianity just be easy?" She was in a season where her church was challenging her, and it was tough for her. And but that was the season that she was in, and I want to ask you all, what season do you all feel like you're in today? You know, God puts us all in different seasons. He gives us all different words for different seasons. And for some of us may be in a good season right now. Some of us may be in a very tough season. In the fifth verse here, the tone shifts a little bit. And Paul says, "As for you, always be sober minded, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry." After Paul has warned what others will do, he shifts back to what the reader should be doing. He's contrasting what the world will do with what the Christian should be doing. He commands us to always be sober minded. Well, for the Western reader, that it seems like it could be pretty simple. Well, be sober minded. Well, we won't get drunk. Okay, that takes care of that one. What's the next one? But the translation is a little bit different than the way we understand it. What the original verb meant was kind of to maintain calm, to keep a level head, don't get hot-headed and bent out of shape, as we might say. The one who is sober-minded is going to be ready when, in the season when false doctrine arises. He'll be able to identify it, and he won't be easily swayed because of his ears, his itching ears, as Paul would say. Paul also commands us to suffer hardship. This is the guy who is sitting in jail. He's in his last season of his life, and he's cold. He tells Timothy later in the verse that he's left his coat somewhere. He doesn't have his parchments. He doesn't have his books. His friends have left him. One of his friends not only left him but hurt him, and here Paul is sitting in probably a dark jail cell, encouraging us to endure hardship. That really puts a lot of perspective on it, because in a lot of places that we are, it's easy for us to say, well, this is just a season in your life where it's going to be tough for now, but it'll get easier. And Paul is the ultimate example of, there are times that it's extremely hard, but for Paul, there's still something that he's clinging to. For some reason, Paul knows something here that he'll let on later in the verses, but for some reason, Paul knows that there is something worth enduring hardship for. If anyone were in a situation to tell us that the faith wasn't worth it and it wasn't worth enduring hardship for Jesus, it would be Paul in this situation. He is in a place where a lot of people's spirits would be broken. Paul then calls us to do the work of an evangelist. It's very interesting to me that Paul places this following the command to suffer hardship. I think it's kind of telling. He's telling us that evangelism is going to be hard. Following the faith is going to be hard at times. There are going to be times where God calls us to do things that none of us want to, and it's going to stretch us. It's going to be a season of growing, if you will, where we're not necessarily comfortable, but we need to get into the Word and grow in that season, because God's putting us there for a reason. And finally, Paul commands us to fulfill our ministry. For some of us, fulfilling our ministry is a pretty simple thing. If somebody is working in the ministry, they've got a job description for their ministry, and looks like that takes care of that. But for others of us who aren't in a ministry, or we don't necessarily know what our ministry is right now, it can be a little tougher. And especially if you feel like you're in a tough season right now. Maybe you're frustrated, you feel imprisoned like Paul was. Maybe you feel alone. And here Paul is challenging us to fulfill our ministries, even though he's in this very tough situation alone. He's in a tough season of his life. His final season, maybe his toughest, as he's facing death. He's commanding us to fulfill our ministries. Paul is doing everything that he has commanded us to do, and it's landed him ultimately in jail. And here in the Western world, that's not something we have to worry about. One of the worst things that we have to worry about is getting made fun of a little bit, getting poked fun of as a Christian, and we're not going to have to worry about going to prison for our faith. And Paul is suffering one of the worst hardships for his faith and telling us to go through all these things. And then it takes a turn here in 6 through 8. We see why Paul is telling us to do that. Verses 6 through 8. For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. Paul talks about 3 things in these verses: the past, the present, and the future. Verse 6, he tells us about his present situation, saying that he's in his last season, he's being poured out, he knows his end is near. Then in verse 7, he speaks about the past, and he says basically that all the things that he has done in his life, he's also commanded Timothy to do here in verse 7. He's fought the good fight, he's finished the race, and he's kept the faith. And then in verse 8, we see why he's telling Timothy to do this. We see why he's had this hope. We see why he's been able to endure these situations. He looks to the future. Henceforth is laid up for me a crown of righteousness. His faith, he's able to endure these tough situations that he's in because he knows that a crown of righteousness is laid up for him in heaven. He knows that it will be worth it. In these situations wherein, you think of a tough situation in your life. You look back on it now and you think, well, it wasn't too bad. But when you were in it, that situation was extremely tough. For me, one instance is when I was home on a winter break, I got called in to plow snow, and I plowed snow for 36 hours. And once it got past about 20 hours, it was pretty tough staying awake. And it was a tough situation to be in, but I knew I was getting paid $25 an hour. By the time I got the check, I kind of forgot how tough it was at the time, and it made it well worth it. But any example that we can think of like that kind of pales in comparison to what eternity will be like. That feeling that you get when you're rewarded for doing something good, and you know that you've done the right thing. How much more will going through these tough seasons in your life, how much more will you be rewarded for that when you get into heaven? I want to leave you all with this challenge. I think if a lot of us were in Paul's situation, a letter from us would look something like this. Oh, Timothy, man, everyone's left me. Not only that, but these Roman soldiers threw me into prison, and they're horrible to me. I'm alone. I left my coat in Troas, as well as my books and my parchment, and Alexander the coppersmith hurt me. It's horrible. I can't do it anymore. Why has God allowed this to happen to me? A lot of times we buy into this false thing that if we're in a tough situation in our life, that we've missed God somehow. And I think that is definitely the case in some instances, and we need to be careful, but there are also going to be trials that God is going to allow us to go through tough seasons so that we can grow. And I think we need to be a little bit more careful that we're sensitive to what God is doing. And not only that, we need to be looking for what we can do in this season. Paul has challenged us all to fulfill our ministry. No matter what season we're in, we need to be able and willing to fulfill our ministry. So Paul is in a place where a lot of us would be looking to be ministered to. He's still looking to minister to others and finding ways to do it. We're ambassadors for Christ, and we need to be ready to preach in in all seasons. Oftentimes we have too many fair weather Christians. I think today you all have a choice to make. Do you want to be a fair weather Christian, or do you want your crown in heaven? Do you want to suffer through some pain now that when you get to heaven and look back, it will look like nothing and you'll hardly remember the pain that you're going through? Is it worth suffering through that? I invite you to come forward today if you're tired of feeling like Paul, imprisoned, and if you're finally ready to give your life to God and be ready to do the ministry, to do the Lord's ministry wherever you are. I invite you to come forward today and commit your life to Him. I want to pray real quick. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity to share here, and I ask that your word fell on good soil here. And I ask that this grow and take root in each of our lives, that no matter what season each of us are in, Lord, that we be looking to do your ministry in that season and be ready to sow in other people's lives, Lord, and that give us the hope to persevere through whatever situation we're in, the hope of eternal glory with you. I thank you, Lord. Amen. Guys, I want you to say hello to Dr. Kitchens for me. This is going on YouTube for him to grade.